David Hockney is an English painter, printmaker, stage designer and photographer, who is one of the most influential British artists of the 20th century. Hockney was an important contributor to the art movement of the 1960s, and is best known for his vividly colored portraits of life in Los Angeles at that time. Hockney was the fourth of 5 children. He was born in Bradford, West Yorkshire, in 1937, to working-class parents. His father, Kenneth, had been a conscientious objector in World War I and was a lifelong campaigner for nuclear disarmament. His mother, Laura, was a churchgoer and a vegetarian. She raised her children as strict Methodists, and shunned smoking and drinking at home. In 1953, when he was 16, Hockney enrolled in the Bradford School of Art, a small institution where the focus was on traditional observation, drawing and figurative work. His own work was abstract and personal. Socially, he made lots of friends, and often travelled to London to catch art shows. In 1957, when he was 20, he exhibited and sold this picture, Portrait of My Father, at the Yorkshire Artists' Exhibition, at Leeds Art Gallery. In the same year, he took the National Diploma in Design examination, and graduated with honours. In 1959, when Hockney was 22, he moved to London to study at the Royal College of Art. His professors liked his work, but Hockney, being self-motivated, began painting pictures influenced by the poetry that he liked to read. Hockney was gay, and had known it from an early age. He had been reading the works of poets who wrote of their deep love of men. Hockney decided to use these themes as a way of exploring his own sexuality, and to make what he described as propaganda for homosexual love. Homosexuality was still illegal in the UK at the time. Hockney began painting works that celebrated homosexual love, incorporating phallic elements, as well as bright colours, and strong visual imagery. Stylistically, these paintings combine thickly applied paint, with figurative images, and graffiti-like writing. Hockney intended that the writing would force people to come up close to examine the canvas, and read it. Like graffiti on a wall. In his paintings Hockney adopted a code that his 19th-century hero, poet Walt Whitman, had used in his journals to disguise his love for a Confederate soldier. In it, the number 1 is the letter A, 2 is B and so on. The numbers shown in this painting indicate his feelings, and represent DH, for David Hockney, and WW, for Walt Whitman. Another example is this painting, completed towards the end of Hockney's second year at the Royal College of Art. The idea for the painting is based on a poem of the same title by Walt Whitman. 2 lines of the poem have been scribbled on the right-hand side, giving a commentary on the men's activities. The number translates to DB or Doll Boy, Hockney's name for his own secret love at the time, singer Cliff Richard. Hockney excelled at self-promotion. In his first term at the College of Arts in 1959, Hockney wore a blue boiler suit and a German Panzer cap to establish himself as an eccentric personality. He gave long titles to his works in catalogues, to draw attention to his name. He dyed his hair during his first trip to the US in 1961. His blonde thatch subsequently became a main element of his public persona. At this time the pop artist as a fashionable personality was part and parcel of what the press called swinging London. Hockney contributed to, and benefited from, the development of his young artist image, and soon became a symbol of these associations. He featured in the exhibition, Young Contemporaries, that heralded the arrival of British pop art and, although associated with the movement, his early works are said to display expressionistic elements. In 1962, the magazine, Queen, showed a photograph of Hockney standing in front of this painting. The article described him as a witty young talent, but, unlike later photographs, the painting was the focus of the article. As his reputation grew, various reporters began to define him as a celebrity, in his own right. A grand procession is considered an important early Hockney work, as it shows how the artist blends the whimsical with the mythic. It is said to foreshadow his later work in the theatre. Since then, the 12-foot-wide canvas has been displayed in Hockney retrospective exhibitions at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and the Tate Gallery in London. In 2002 this work was purchased by a private American collector for $2.2 million. In the summer of 1961, while he was still studying at the College of Art, Hockney traveled in his holidays to New York for the first time. His American friends showed him around the city's galleries and museums, as well as the gay hotspots. Before he left London, Hockney had sold several of his paintings to pay for the trip. He was also able to work on other paintings and sketches while he was in the US. It was at this time that he produced the print, My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. Later, using pictures from his New York sketchbooks, Hockney came up with the idea of producing an updated version of the 18th-century English artist William Hogarth's work, The Rake's Progress. Hockney's prints wickedly recount his misadventures in America. He eventually finished this work in 1963. A critic suggested that these works may not be art as we understand it, but they are artful and cunning. Hockney was offered £5,000 for the printing plates for the series, and he used the money to live in America for a year. In the meantime, he finished his studies at the Royal College and received considerable attention from critics, professors, and peers at several student shows. Hockney challenged the rules on a few of the Royal College of Art's graduation requirements before he graduated. He refused to complete a final assignment to paint a female model from life, instead basing his life painting for a diploma segment on an image in a male physique magazine. He also submitted a thesis on fauvism, so hastily written that his tutors questioned passing it. Ultimately though, Hockney was recognized as an exceptional artist, and awarded a gold medal of distinction, which he received at the graduation ceremony, wearing his signature gold lame jacket. After an end-of-term trip to Florence, Rome, and Berlin with a friend, Hockney began teaching at Maidstone School of Art in the autumn. He set himself up with a studio in his new home in West London's Notting Hill district, where he completed this painting. In 1963, straight out of art school, he burst onto the London scene, completely selling out his first London gallery show at Casmin's Gallery, Pictures with People in Them. Hockney made his second trip to the US in December 1963. He flew first to New York, and visited the Pratt Institute School of Art, where he completed and sold 2 more etchings, Edward Lear and Jungle Boy. Hockney's main purpose in returning to America was to travel to California. He had gained his first impressions of Los Angeles from reading books and magazines in the UK, before he visited the city. While he was still in London, he had painted this imaginary shower scene, set in Los Angeles. It shows 2 men he had copied from the homoerotic American magazine, Physique Pictorial. Hockney frequently referred to this magazine for published photos of men in various contrived poses, in domestic interiors. Hockney was fascinated by these young, built, and tanned men, and he was hungry to experience the exciting underground world of Los Angeles. He loved the city, and made Santa Monica his home. He spent days at the beach, on the Santa Monica Pier, people watching and admiring the beautiful boys that seemed to be there every day. One feature of the Californian scene struck Hockney as being particularly interesting. He was fascinated by the way water was being used in the dry climate, something he had never seen in cold grey London. He just loved the swimming pools, the lawn sprinklers, and the showers, as well as the people using them. Water, in all its forms, would occupy Hockney for years. The swimming pool would become the focus for many of his major paintings of the 60s and 70s, and, his representations of Los Angeles houses would become defining images in the cultural identity of Southern California. In his pool pictures, Hockney found many ways to represent the water. Sometimes, the play of light on the surface is shown as squiggly white lines as shown here. Sometimes, the water is represented as patches of varying color, resembling jigsaw puzzle pieces or camouflage patterns. This painting was sold at auction in 2002 for $2.8 million. Sometimes, the movement of flowing water offered Hockney the opportunity to experiment with almost abstract arrangements of curve, translucency, and forms as in this painting. Hockney refined most elements of the picture to form an arrangement of flat planes, focusing the viewer's attention on the spray of water released by the swimmer's dive. The surface of the water, along with the rest of the background, was painted quickly with a roller, while the splash itself took more than 3 weeks of fine work with a range of brush sizes. The combination of the explosive movement of the water, with the haunting stillness of the rest of the picture, creates one of Hockney's most arresting images. This painting shows the communal swimming pool of an apartment block which was the home of one of Hockney's friends, art dealer and gallery owner Nick Wilder. Hockney lived there from summer 1966 until early 1967, while at the same time renting a studio in central Los Angeles. The naked figure climbing out of the pool is Hockney's new boyfriend and muse, Peter Schlesinger, a 19-year-old painter and photographer he met while teaching at UCLA. Schlesinger became a favorite subject for Hockney, and the many drawings of him show the informal intimacy between the two. In June of 1967, Hockney took his friend to Europe, and the two toured the continent. At this time, Hockney's interest in photography grew. He would take endless shots of Schlesinger, mostly for fun, but also for study. Over the next few years, Hockney's work became increasingly naturalistic. His subjects were the famous, the glamorous, and the fashionable of Tinseltown and swinging London. Hockney worked directly from his circle of friends and acquaintances, in a series of what he called double portraits, that capture the intimate and often complex relationships between his sitters. This painting shows Christopher Isherwood, the English novelist and author, with his friend, Don Bacardi. It was created 2 years after Hockney officially moved to Los Angeles, and shows the beginning of Hockney's desire for more naturalism in his work. Isherwood sits in hawkish profile, eyes locked on his much younger lover. Everything in the painting directs our gaze towards Bacardi, from Isherwood himself, whose head turns towards him in profile, to the position of his crossed leg. The couple are seated in the Santa Monica, California, home they were to share for decades. Hockney worked for 6 months on the painting. He wanted to portray the two men, not only as friends, but also as lovers. Bacardi's full frontal curiosity about the world, and Isherwood's worried concern about his lover, capture the complex dynamics of their relationship. This painting shows the contemporary art collectors, Fred and Marcia Weissman, in the sculpture garden of their Los Angeles home. The couple stand apart, as relentlessly stiff and still as the objects that surround them. His stance is echoed in the totem pole to the right, hers in the Henry Moore sculpture behind her. Her toothy smile also mirrors that of the totem pole. Brilliant, raking light flattens and abstracts the scene. This light, rather than any affinity between the collectors, unites the composition. In this painting, the subjects are a couple who were Hockney's friends, the dress designer Ozzie Clark, and the fabric designer Celia Birtwell. When Ozzie and Celia married in 1969, Hockney was their best man. The couple are portrayed in their Notting Hill apartment, in a style which is both realistic and highly simplified. Usually in Hockney's double portraits, one character looks at the other, who looks out of the painting at the viewer, thus creating a cyclical movement of looking. This painting is unusual, in that both subjects look out at the artist and viewer. Percy is the cat. Hockney found the work difficult to paint because of the life-size figures. He painted one face many times before he got it right. He also had problems with the open window, which was the source of the light coming into the room. In this double portrait, the artist delves into the psychology of his subjects. His father looks down at a book on art and photography. He is engrossed and ignores his wife and the painter. His feet seem to be in motion, just touching the carpet. It was known that Hockney's father fidgeted during sittings, and his impatience with the situation is clearly captured. Hockney's mother, meanwhile, poses quietly, as requested, hands neatly folded in her lap. Her direct gaze acknowledges the presence of the artist. Her son. She has a benevolent expression. By 1971, Hockney was experiencing some tension in his relationship with his lover, Peter Schlesinger. The age difference had become a problem, and Schlesinger wanted some independence and room to grow. Also, Hockney's eye had begun to wander, and his social life became more active once again. He continued to entertain large groups of people in his studio, and basked in the glory of his fame. Hockney traveled to America for a break, and when he returned, he found that Schlesinger had moved to Paris, and had been having an affair while he was away. Schlesinger has said that he felt Hockney placed his work above everything else. He felt ignored, so he decided not to move back in with Hockney again. Hockney was devastated, and started taking Valium to combat the depression and loneliness he suffered. His melancholy is depicted in this picture, painted at the time. A figure peers coolly down at a distorted body moving through the troubled light of a swimming pool. This picture projects an intensity and a sense of longing, set against an almost limitless landscape. Although the work suggests a relationship between the two figures in the painting, it is really a statement by the artist about his relationship with Schlesinger. Hockney is the figure in the pool. Schlesinger looks on. This painting was sold at auction by Christie's in New York recently for $90 million, an auction record for a work by a living artist. In 1973, Jack Hazan, a film producer, created the semi-fictional documentary, A Bigger Splash, showing the creation of Hockney's major works of the early 1970s. The film focuses on Hockney's relationship with his lover, Peter Schlesinger, but also goes to inventive lengths to represent Hockney's creative processes, and to produce moving images from his pictures. When Hazan made this film, public discussion of homosexuality was taboo. Yet here it was, a movie that showed Hockney's obsession with a muscular model, his self-doubt, his self-absorption, and his nudity. For 2 weeks, after watching A Bigger Splash, Hockney locked himself in a room and mourned the day he ever met Jack Hazan, who had dreamt of producing an independent film about someone in the art world, under the impression that it would make him some money. Hockney was shocked and devastated by the film, but he finally signed for its release in order to give Hazan the respect and admiration he deserved. The film was banned in many countries for its explicit portrayal of homosexuality but won many awards among the critics. In 1974, Hockney began a decade-long personal relationship with Gregory Evans, who moved with him to the US in 1976, and has remained a business partner ever since. In the mid-70s, Hockney's dedication to a naturalistic painting style appeared to him to be leading to an artistic dead end. He eventually found a way forward, through theatrical stage design. He produced sets for 2 opera productions at Glyndebourne in Sussex, Stravinsky's The Rake's Progress, in 1974, and Mozart's The Magic Flute, in 1977. The work encouraged him to engage in greater simplification, and to work on a much larger scale, completely immersing the spectator. Those intense interludes in the theatre proved decisive in preparing him to paint with new vigor. In 1978, again at Glyndebourne, he designed costumes and scenery for Mozart's opera, The Magic Flute. Over the next decade, he returned repeatedly to set design, gripped by the challenge of incorporating real bodies into artificial spaces. At his studio, he constructed a 6-foot by 4-foot proscenium arch, in which he built sets on a scale of 1.5 inches to the foot. He also used a computerized setup that let him punch in and program lighting cues at will, and synchronize them to a soundtrack of the music. Hockney was born with synesthesia, which allowed him to see colors in response to musical stimuli. This does not show up in his painting or photography, but became a common underlying principle in his designs for stage sets, for ballet and opera, where he based background colors and lighting on the colors he sees while listening to the music. In 1992, he produced the stage design for Puccini's opera, Turandot, performed at the Lyric Opera of Chicago. Years later, in 2017, Hockney was awarded the San Francisco Opera Medal for set design for his work on this opera, which has been staged many times since its creation. By the late 1970s, Hockney began to realize that, for him, naturalism as a method of seeing failed to satisfactorily capture the world. He wanted to invite the viewer into the picture, as he had with his opera sets. His painting from this period began to show the scene from many different viewpoints, something that Hockney describes as reverse perspective, drawing the viewer into the picture. This painting is based on Hockney's daily commute, from his home in the Hollywood Hills up on Mulholland Drive, to his studio on Santa Monica Boulevard. While most people living in LA hate their daily commute, Hockney's painting captures all that Los Angeles stands for: golden sunshine, towering mountains, and a slavish commitment to the daily drive to work. Unusually, he painted the scene from memory, and completed it within a few weeks, despite its colossal size, 220 by 620 centimeters. In 1982, Hockney purchased a new home off Mulholland Drive, in the Hollywood Hills, and decorated it in the vibrant palette he had used in his recent opera sets. In this picture, he fragments the perspective of his own living room, with a nod to Cubism. The bust of Pablo Picasso above the fireplace, and the Cubist drawing in Hockney's own hand, above the mantelpiece, continue the theme. This painting, produced in 1985, was a diptych titled, "A Walk Around the Hotel Courtyard." The perspective, again, uses Cubist techniques, allowing objectivity and convention to be lost in the attempt to maximize space and color. As a result, the viewer is presented with more visual information than could be observed in reality, like looking through a fisheye lens. Life was not always pleasant for Hockney. In 1978, he realized that he was going deaf when he could no longer hear the voices of female students in his class. He believed there were compensations, though. He claimed it induced a sharpening of his vision, clarifying his sense of space. The other long shadow in those years was HIV/AIDS. During the 1980s and early 90s, many of his acquaintances and closest friends died. Among them the film director, Tony Richardson, and the male model Joe McDonald. Hockney says, "I remember once going to New York and visiting 3 separate hospitals. It was the worst time of my life." Years later, he confided to a friend that he did sometimes consider suicide, adding, "We all have a deep desire to survive, because we enjoy the experience of loving." The camera offered Hockney possibilities that were far removed from simple photorealism. In his 1982 exhibition, Drawing with a Camera, he showed for the first time the composite portraits he called joiners, made by collaging Polaroid photos, or prints. In these pictures, the viewpoint continually shifts as the viewer's eye moves around the image. In Hockney's own words, he had made the Polaroid camera into an extraordinary drawing tool. This allowed him, once more, to represent the wonderful experience of seeing in 3 dimensions, on a flat surface. A single photograph can only show one point of view, usually for a short period of time, he says. All photographs share the same flaw, the lack of a time dimension. A picture of his mother was an early photomontage. The photographs are taken from different perspectives, and at slightly different times. The result is a work that suggests cubism, which was one of Hockney's major aims. The invention of cubism, in the early 20th century, helped to topple the single perspective in paintings, but, with photography, it still existed. A film director approached Hockney about creating an artwork to feature in his next film. Hockney created a photo collage of the actress, Theresa Russell, playing Marilyn Monroe. She is posing naked for a centerfold shot. Hockney divided Russell's body up, by taking myriad shots of it, then reassembling a full figure in this work, nude, 17th of June 1984. Hockney says that only erotic photographs inspire you to look for more than 30 seconds. This pin-up requires you to look very slowly. You are forced to scan every inch of her body, which makes it more interesting, more erotic. Whether Hockney was successful in these photographic experiments depends on whom you ask. The complexity of Hockney's photographic collages culminates in this image of the Mojave Desert, Pear Blossom Highway. It took Hockney a week to shoot the hundreds of photographs of a juncture in the road. With its blazing blue sky, distant mountains, and a few pieces of scattered trash. The work was first shown at the International Center of Photography, in New York. One critic described it as a metaphor for Hockney's photo collages, which he described as the intersection of painting with photography, and the intersection of art with everyday life. Pear Blossom Highway shows a crossroads in a very wide open space, which is typical of the scenery in the western United States. This picture was not just about a crossroads, but about driving. On one side you can see the road signs, which the driver is always watching. On the other side you see the loneliness of this place. It is a view with two different perspectives. Hockney returned more frequently to Yorkshire in the 1990s, usually every 3 months, to visit his mother, who finally died in 1999. He rarely stayed for more than 2 weeks until 1997, when his friend, Jonathan Silver, who was terminally ill, encouraged him to paint the local surroundings. He did this at first, with paintings based on memory, some from his boyhood. One of these was The Road Across the Wolds, which shows the view Hockney could see while travelling from his mother's home in the East Yorkshire town of Bridlington, to Silver's house in West Yorkshire. Hockney returned to Yorkshire for longer and longer periods, and by 2005, he was painting the countryside on plein air. He set up residence in a large red brick studio in the seaside town of Bridlington, about 75 miles from where he was born. He created paintings made of multiple smaller canvases, 9, 15 or more, placed together. To help him visualize work at that scale, he used photographic reproductions. Each day's work was photographed, and Hockney generally took a print home with him. Over the years, Hockney's paintings got bigger and bigger. He began work on this painting, A Bigger Grand Canyon, in 1998. With its many viewpoints and shifting timeframes, the painting suggests what it is like to be in a landscape. To travel around it. To view tiny details, and dramatic vistas, and to see the changing light. The large format, and extravagant colors, have been compared to a Hollywood movie set. The work is now owned by the National Gallery of Australia, who purchased it in 1999 for $5 million. In June 2007, Hockney's largest painting, Bigger Trees Near Water, which measures 4.6 by 12.3 meters, was hung in the Royal Academy's largest gallery in its annual summer exhibition. This work is a monumental scale view of a coppice in Hockney's native Yorkshire, between Bridlington and York. It was painted on 50 individual canvases, mostly working in situ, over a 5-week period. In 2008, Hockney donated the painting to the Tate Gallery, in London, saying, "I thought if I'm going to give something to the Tate, I want to give them something really good. It's going to be here for a while. I don't want to give things I'm not too proud of. I thought this was a good painting, because it's of England. It seems like the right thing to do." In 1999, Hockney made his most surprising move yet. For 2 years, he stopped painting, while developing a controversial theory. He claimed that, from the 15th century on, long before the invention of the camera, Western artists created many paintings with the help of mirrors and lenses. He published his conclusions in the 2001 book, Secret Knowledge: Rediscovering the Lost Techniques of the Old Masters, which was revised in 2006. Many took his meaning to be that the old masters cheated, which was never his assertion. Many also disagreed with his conclusions. After a landscape exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum, Bilbao, in 2012, Hockney turned away from painting, and from his Yorkshire home, and went back to Los Angeles and his Hollywood Hills home studio. Over the months that followed, he became absorbed once again, in portraiture, inviting sitters from all areas of his life into his studio, including friends, family, and acquaintances. Each work is the same size, showing his sitter in the same chair, against the same vivid blue background, and all were painted in the same time frame of 3 days. Hockney considers the 82 portraits he produced as a single unit, and they are displayed that way in exhibitions. The portraits are all the same size, 90 by 120 centimeters, and are displayed in a continuous line that extends around all 4 walls of the gallery, as well as both sides of a dividing wall that runs down the middle of the room. They are arranged according to when they were painted. Hockney has long since attained the status of a national treasure, a passionate, cardigan dandy, voicing his impatience with the nanny state of the 21st century. To some, his constant experimentation suggests that Hockney is something of an artistic lightweight. In 1996, the New York Times art critic wrote, "His work is often as hard to resist as it is to take seriously. It skims across the surface of art, borrowing liberally from earlier masters." Significantly, Hockney's first retrospective in 29 years became Tate Britain's most popular exhibition recently, with 478,000 visitors taking in the show. Hockney turned down a knighthood in 1990, only to get the Companion of Honor in 1997, and the Order of Merit in 2012. There are just 24 members of the Order of Merit, and no more than 45 Companions of Honor at any one time. Apart from David Hockney, just 3 others are currently members of both. Not bad for a working-class lad from Yorkshire. Hockney has received honorary degrees from institutions that include the University of Oxford, Yale University, and the University of Cambridge. His 2001 publication, Secret Knowledge: Rediscovering the Lost Techniques of the Old Masters, received critical acclaim, and has been published in over 12 languages. In 2011, the first volume of Christopher Sykes's biography, Hockney, was published. In 2016, Hockney announced the issue of a new book, David Hockney, a bigger book, costing £1,750. The book has gone through 19 proof stages. He unveiled it at the Frankfurt Book Fair, where he was the keynote speaker at the opening press conference. In 2012, Hockney, who is worth an estimated $55 million, transferred paintings valued at $125 million to the David Hockney Foundation, created in 2008, and gave an additional $1.2 million in cash to help fund the foundation's operations. In 2023, Hockney is today the best-known living British artist. His verve and curiosity are undiminished. Asked a few years ago about the place of love in his life, he answered, "I love my work, and I love life. I write it at the end of letters. Love life, David Hockney.